Most African students are rushing to Europe and America in search of schools in those continents, while those who are wise will actually consider Australia. Now, Australia is a continent which accepts students massively from Africa, right? And if you haven't yet applied for schools in Australia, or if you are thinking of studying abroad next year, 2026, and you're from Africa, please consider Australia. There are 4 schools in Australia which currently accept students from Africa, and those schools have high acceptance rates. So if you apply to those schools in Australia, which I'll mention shortly, right, I guarantee you the chances of getting an admission to those schools are very, very high right now. And they're most popular with African students, which most people don't know about, right? So please, if you are smart enough, watch this video to the end, right? And make sure you check these schools right after this video, okay? So before I mention the names of these schools in Australia, let's talk about the general requirements and what you need to apply for your visa, right? And actually this requirement apply to most schools in Australia, right? So it doesn't just apply to these 4 schools which I'll mention shortly. So please, let's talk about it. Now, what are the general requirements for admissions into schools in Australia? One, if you are going in for bachelor's, right, you need your secondary school diploma. You need your secondary school diploma. For those who are in Cameroon, if you are going into Australia for studies, maybe you are going in for bachelor's, you need your GCE O levels and advanced levels, right? While for those who are in Nigeria, you need your WAEC and your JAM. And for those in Ghana, you need your WASI. Please, is it WASI or is it WASE? Okay, anyways. Secondly, if you are going in for postgraduate studies in Australia, right, you need your bachelor's degree. I believe all these requirements, we all know them already. Okay, but anyways, I'm just mentioning them here. So masters, before you apply for schools in masters for Australia, check the school requirement extremely well, because most schools in Australia will focus on your GPA. If your GPA is kind of lame, right? For example, for those who are coming in with second class, lower, third class, you might find it difficult to get admissions into schools in Australia. Mostly these 4 schools which I'll mention shortly. So please check the school program and check the specific requirement of those programs. Those in masters, please take note. The next requirement you will need is some programs in these schools in Australia will ask you for work experience, so they will need to see some kind of work experience certificate, right? Mostly those who are going in for masters in business administration, right? Some schools in Australia will need work experience, so take this into consideration. Next requirement you will need to apply for schools in Australia is your English test, right? English test, you need IELTS, your PTE, Duolingo, TOEFL, and so on and so forth, right? So you already know those English test exams which you can take. When you want to apply for your visa to Australia, right, you will need to show your English test, your IELTS, right? So as from 2024, the minimum IELTS scores which we need to show to the visa authorities during your visa application stuff is 5.5 or 9. Okay, so please take this into consideration. Let's go now to the second part, which is the visa application part, right? As compared to Europe, which is mostly called a visa D for student visa, in Australia it is called a subclass 500. Okay, so in Australia it's not called a visa D, it is called a subclass 500. So what are things that are included in this subclass 500, which is a student visa? One, you must show the confirmation of enrollment, COE, right? You must show the confirmation of enrollment. Under this confirmation of enrollment, you must have an offer from a CRISCO registered institution. So what's the meaning of CRISCO? CRISCO here means Commonwealth Register of Institution and Courses for Overseas Students. So you must have this before you can even apply for a student visa to Australia, right? Or let me say a subclass 500 to Australia. And the second thing which you must have is a proof of funds. Now, talking about proof of funds to Australia is quite expensive. For those who don't know yet, right? That is why so many students now prefer to go to Europe, because some countries' proof of funds are quite lower, but as compared to Australia, it is quite expensive. So bear this in mind. before you apply for schools in Australia, the proof of funds is very, very expensive. Okay, and as from 2024, the required proof of funds is 29,710 Australian dollars. I don't know how much this is. You can convert it into naira, into cedis, into franc CFA, and you know the exact amount which you need to provide as proof of funds. Okay, so it is 29,710 Australian dollars, right? So this amount is for a living cost. You must show this amount before you can apply for a student visa to Australia. I hope this is clear. Sorry for my audio quality. I'm using the built-in mic for my phone, so you might be hearing other sound around me while I'm talking. I promise to get a proper mic by the end of the month. Okay, so the main thing you should be focused here is the information which I'm giving you. It's a very hot cake. And also, if you like such videos, please subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon so you get notified when my next video goes live. Okay, if you have any question concerning Australia, maybe other countries in Europe, Canada, USA, you can leave them in my comment section. I will make sure to reply to those questions within 48 hours maximum. Okay, and if you want to talk with me one-on-one, you are free to do so. It's free of charge. Just let me know down below if you want to talk with me one-on-one. Okay, now the next thing which you will need to apply for a student visa to Australia is your health insurance. Just like in Europe, you need your health insurance. Okay, but in Australia it's called the health cover. The fourth thing which we need is a genuine temporary entrance statement. Okay, so this statement is like you convincing the immigration authorities in Australia, like you need to convince them, tell them that no, we are going in for studies. You need to convince them, right? I believe you already know all this. Remember, there are countries now in Europe which reject students visa not because the documents are bad or not because their documents are incomplete, but it's because those students fail to show genuine intent to study in those countries. Take for example, now in Belgium, so many students are being rejected, right? Because the Belgian authorities have noticed that most students are coming into Belgium to work, not to study. Like, I don't understand why a student will go to Europe and not study, right? If you are going into Europe using a student visa, you must go to school, because if you don't go to school, the immigration authorities will know. In Europe, they will track you and they will know if you are going to school or not. So if you fail to go to school frequently, or let me say, if you are only failing your courses, the immigration authorities in those countries or in these countries, they will take note of this and they might cancel your student visa, right? We all know that the main aim of going into Europe using the student visa is to work, right? We need to work and help papa and mama back home, but also go to school and make sure you pass your courses, because if not, they might send you back home and you will lose your money and your time will be wasted. Okay, the last thing which we need to apply for a student visa to Australia, which is also called the subclass 500 visa, is your visa application fee. Now this is also very expensive, right? The amount of money which was set last year for visa application fees is 1,600 Australian dollars, right? So if you compare this amount into your local currency, you know the exact amount you need to pay for the visa application fee. And again, this amount is not refundable, so please take all this into consideration. And apart from these 5 points which I've given, there are other application materials which you might also be required. Okay, so I've already talked of the transcript, right? So you might be asked to provide your transcript from your previous education. Yeah, for those who are applying to Belgium, I think you know about this, because the Belgian embassy also requires your transcript from your previous education. Okay, secondly, statement of purpose or motivational letter. Okay, the third is your letter of recommendation. And if you are going into Australia for masters, take note, you need to provide this. It is mandatory. You must provide a letter of recommendation. Okay, but you can also check the school requirement, check the immigration website, the Australian immigration website. Maybe this has changed, I don't know, or maybe this will change by the time you're watching this video. So the next thing which you might be asked to provide is your CV. Again, If you are going into Australia for masters, please you must provide a CV. You must provide this. It is mandatory for all master students to get admission into Australia. They must provide CV. Okay. The next thing which you might also be asked to provide when you want to apply for an Australian student visa is your standardized test score. Yes, so not all programs may ask for this test score. Some programs may not, while some may. Mostly those who are going in for business and research programs. Now, these schools or these universities which I mentioned earlier, which are mostly accepting African students, and also which will also give you an Australian visa for studies. There are four of them, right? So the first is the University of Melbourne, right? The next is the University of Sydney. We also have Australian National University, and the last one is Monash University. These four schools which I've just mentioned now, check them out. I'm very sure and confident that if you apply to schools in Australia, mostly these four schools which I've mentioned now, those schools will accept you without any question if you provide the required documents and you follow the procedures. Okay.